We're live, Senator.
Okay. Okay, I'm not going to be able to digest this, Senator Brock, right now, but
Understood.
I will at the break. So
I'm sure you're looking for things to do during the break, Mr. Chair.
Okay, so we're going to get started. It's been a little hard for me, I don't know about others, to welcome everybody. Welcome to the public. Good morning. I thought it'd be useful, especially on some of the economic development and housing issues, to know what's going on in budget adjustment. It's been hard, and we're going to have to do the same thing with the budget bill, because these things tend to start and get more attention in the House. But we've got a few witnesses that I've asked to come in and describe to us what issues on programs and spending that this committee has in its jurisdiction may be impacted by what is being proposed in budget adjustment. And now I guess we have the benefit of, I don't know who wants to lead off, but whoever leads off could tell us where budget adjustment is in the House. I'm guessing that it's coming up pretty soon on the floor. I heard it was voted out of committee. So we have three folks here, as I understand it, from JFO. Who would, with that background, who would you think would be the best to start off?
Senator, I don't know if I don't think I'm the best person to start off, but before I sort of hand it off to either Stephanie or Pat, I just wanted to quickly introduce Pat to the committee, and just sort of provide context about, you might be seeing Pat more often. Our office hired a new fiscal analyst to assist what we're calling a revenue team. We're trying to create a team within the office to, create redundancy on the revenue side and on the economic development side. And so that team is going to be me, Pat, and Julia Richter, who you may have met thus far. And so Patrick is going to be assisting this committee on, I think, many items such as, housing, remote worker, and then some other economic development issues that touch upon taxes. So you'll be seeing lots of Pat. And so I want to introduce Pat to the committee, and I'll sort of step into the background now.
Graham, thank you. It's great to have a revenue team. It's a great rethink. That's not great. Thanks.
Okay, thank you for that. So Patrick, do you want to kick it off in terms of, I know there's some stuff going on in housing for sure in budget adjustment. I don't know if you're the best one to tell us what's going on there. And Senator Clarkson had a question.
I just would suggest we introduce ourselves to Patrick, because this is the first time we've met. I've met Julia and worked with Julia on some CTE stuff, but I'm Allison Clarkson. I represent the Windsor district. Okay.
And I did introduce myself in the preview to Pat. We said hello, and he said he knows Senator Brock already. Have met him probably during finance, right? And Senator Ram we have a portrait of her. If you guys want to say hello.
Yeah, Senator Keisha Ram Hinsdale from Chittenden County. I'm sorry you can't see me, so it's not much of an introduction, but I'll be on video soon.
Okay.
I'm sure I'll be seeing plenty of you. Don't worry.
Right.
Patrick, welcome. It's good to have you. And thank you for sending us this yesterday so we could take a peek at it.
Oh, great. Before I launch into that, you had asked just to start with sort of an update of where appropriations is at in the House. And I don't know, Stephanie, I think you might be best handled to tackle that. Just first question before I start in on the presentation.
The House Appropriations Committee voted out their budget adjustment, and it got several changes from what the governor had proposed for budget adjustment. He made that proposal way back in the middle of December. And it will be up on the floor. I think it was introduced. It's introduced today. It's up on the floor tomorrow for second and third reading tomorrow and Friday. And then the Senate will be working on it next week. I don't know that a hard date's been set yet for getting it out of Senate appropriations, but I imagine it will be probably not the end of next week, but sometime the week after that will be the goal of moving the budget adjustment. And there's a big, now that we have the governor's proposal for FY23, and there's lots of one-time and ARPA related pieces in that, all the pieces between budget adjustment and those pieces that are in the governor's budget will be sort of lined up just to understand the universe that we're working in. So, and
Okay.
I'm going to also drop back into the background.
Okay.
Good to see you, Stephanie.
Yes. Okay.
So I don't know what your preference is. I'm happy to share the presentation on my screen, but it looks like I know Senator Clarkson anyway has it printed out.
Yeah, and actually we have it, if people want to look at it on their iPads or something, we have it, it's posted, Scott's posted it under the documents for today.
Unless I would prefer to see it on the screen.
Okay.
If you don't mind. I'm without access to a printer today.
Let me get that set up. All right, can you see that?
Yep.
Great. All right, so just starting with a general overview, the Budget Adjustment Act is increasing unduplicated appropriations by 358.6 million, which is a 4.9% increase over the budget passed in May of last year. This reflects one-time general funds currently available in the fiscal year 2022 forecast and is appropriating an additional 113 million. The bill is allocating 106.3 million more in ARPA funding. And so the balance there is being made up by matching funds in Medicaid and other smaller special funds adjustments, just to sort of get us up to that top line figure. And I guess just to jump right into something I know you all care a lot about, we will look first at what's going on with housing and homelessness in the budget adjustment. This table here, I don't know if the exact table is in that affordable housing issue brief that Maria and Stephanie actually just put out, but I know all the information on here is. So I guess just taking a step back, looking at 2021, in Act 9 and Act 74, there was a grand total of about $149 million allocated to housing programs. And just to refresher, Act 9 was the COVID relief bill, and Act 74 was the proverbial big bill that was passed in fiscal year 2022. So Act 9 was passed in addition to Act 74, and then the budget adjustment bill this year is also going to be in addition to that Act 74. So you can see from the 2021 session, VHCB received a total of $144 million spread between, so 980 of that coming from the general fund and 64 of that coming from ARPA funding. And then VHIP received a further 5 million coming also from ARPA. Moving just to the right here, you can see the recommendations that have been put out by the governor and now by House Appropriations. Still to be determined on Senate recommendations, but overall the governor recommended 50 million to VHCB, all of which coming from ARPA funding, and then 20 million and 5 million to VHIP and VHFA, also coming from ARPA funding. So overall 75 million, and the House didn't change that top line number, but they are opting to not go ahead with that VHFA funding and instead moving that 5 million up into the VHCB funding. The other difference here is you'll see that instead of fully funding VHCB through strictly ARPA, they're splitting that up between 30 million in general funds and 25 million from ARPA. So still 75 million, but just allocated a little bit differently. And then based on what the governor presented yesterday, looking forward to fiscal year 23, he's proposing another 50 million to VHCB, and then spreading out another 20 million between VHIP, VHFA, and municipal mixed uses, all of which is coming from ARPA funding.
Can I ask a question at this point? The VHFA money, that was to start up with, and the governor's recommend $5 million in FY22 and then another $10 million in FY23. What do you know what that program was for? Do you know what
Yep.
that money was for?
So if we move to this slide, we'll skip down to the third bullet here. So that 5 million that the House declined is meant for the missing middle home builder program. So
It was intended to buy down the costs for builders for developing modest homes, and it was targeted up to 140% AMI, area median income.
So the VHCB money doesn't have those restrictions at all, or those program parameters. This would have been a new program for VHFA.
This would have been a new program for VHFA.
So that program at this point is not being funded at all. Maybe it'll come back in FY.
Right, it's not, the House decision is not to fund it at this point.
Right.
I don't know what their thinking is in terms of the 23 arrangement of housing investments, if they'll revisit it then. But the fact that the reason they changed the VHCB money from entirely ARPA to split between general fund and ARPA was because the guidance from Treasury did not allow the VHCB money to be used in match with the tax credits. And so we weren't able to leverage further as we had hoped on the VHCB money. So I think that was some of the thinking that played into that.
Oh, that's good to know. On VHIP, we talked about this yesterday. It seems less than customary here to put $20 million in budget adjustment. I mean, the Budget Adjustment Act won't get to the governor until probably mid to late February. It doesn't seem like they could spend or even commit that money within 4 months, given the size of the program right now. Why is so much, in your understanding, being put up front in budget adjustment as opposed to being waiting till future years?
I'll be honest, we haven't had in Senate Appropriations the testimony that's coming tomorrow in Senate Appropriations, but I do know that the commissioner has testified that the 5 million that we put in the budget, and we all know that the language that went with VHIP died with the veto on the housing bill. That is, as I understand it, fully subscribed, and so I believe that the 20 million is the projected money that they think if the program continues. I don't know that they would plan to actually deploy all of it in this fiscal year. And it may be committed, or a large part of it could be obligated, but I doubt that all of it would be actually deployed out the door in this fiscal year.
Right.
That's sort of what we heard too.
Yeah.
But
there are some issues of the language dying, but even if the language passed, it seems, given the size of the program, it seems disproportionate. I mean, budget adjustment is theoretically used to make tweaks in underlying budgets if our target missed the mark, and it just doesn't seem, it seems like an awful large number to be putting with 4 months left.
Yeah.
Especially when we don't have any program parameters at this point. But
And as Pat goes through the rest of his presentation, you'll see that budget adjustment this year is a little bit less strict in terms of its no policy.
Yep, got it. Okay. What was did Pat or Stephanie, do you know the reason? I understand that the missing middle program was a new program. Did they just not? I mean, is this more consistent with the stricter guidelines of the past, the budget adjustment? They say this is a new program, so we'll wait to hear more about it in the big bill.
I don't know. I'm sorry, we can go check and see if the Commerce Committee actually, because the way the House operates, they send out letters to the standing committees and ask them for their guidance. And I don't know if Commerce said, hold this one for the big bill. I'll go find out for you. But I'm sorry, I don't know off the top of my head if that's the reason.
Yeah, okay.
Well, if it's housing, it would be
General affairs.
general,
affairs, sorry, yeah.
right. And what we understand is it was very important to have at least some of this money articulated and committed so that the programs which are started and greased and going with VHIP could continue, would that they'd know that there was continued funding and that they would keep projects coming in and keep soliciting home landlords to apply and keep the program going. And that's the major need I understood for some financing to continue this program. But
I was speaking more to the missing middle VHFA.
oh, the missing middle piece.
Yeah.
But there's more money than just the VHFA part for the missing middle. The missing middle is basically any housing project that is above the income criteria that are identified for affordable housing with VHCB, right?
Yeah, I think this is particularly targeted at the stock of single family homes, whether those are standalone homes or condominiums that are available for purchase for people to get into the market, because that's such a very tight segment of the market, to take advantage of the other VHFA programs of reduced, cost mortgage and down payment.
Our first time home buyers assistance program.
Yeah.
Right. Maura had touched on this briefly with us.
Yeah.
Okay, let's move on, Patrick.
Sure. And thank you, Stephanie. That was great insight. So Stephanie did touch on a couple of these things, but so the House proposal, as we saw in that table, they're providing 25 million in ARPA funding and 30 million in general funding as an increase for VHCB. And that's to provide housing and to increase shelter capacity. The reason that my understanding, the reason that some of that money was allocated to the general fund is to maximize those federal low income housing tax credits. So, as essentially not to leave any money on the table. So this in total is 5 million over the governor's 50 million in the adjustment proposal from the governor, which was, as you saw, entirely ARPA funding. So the House agreed, and it was in unison with the governor's recommendation to add 20 million to the VHIP program. And those are also ARPA funding. We touched on the VHFA, and overall, as we saw, both the governor and the House are recommending 75 million from all funds.
So one last question before you leave this. I guess I'm looking for the rationale as they sort of went halfway on the ARPA versus general funds. Why wouldn't they go the whole way if the general funds can match the low income housing credits and the ARPA funds can't? Aren't we leaving money on the table effectively?
That's just a big, broad budget question. I mean, there's a lot of priorities. And there's a lot, the restrictions in terms of use of ARPA dollars. Clearly one of the largest priorities is going to be related to the retirement proposals. And so they were also allocating $50 million of general fund in that reserving it for that proposed, that piece of legislation that's pending to get stability and a big buy down in the unfunded liability there. So they're balancing a lot more beyond the realm of housing when you're talking about general fund.
Got it. Thank you.
So that was everything that was in there specific to housing. So moving into the section G300, which is a bit more broad and looks at the economy, workforce, and communities in general. The House is increasing funding for the Department of Labor by 12.8 million, and that is to be used for the unemployment insurance program expenses. This money was previously in another section in the governor's proposal of B400, and it was using general fund dollars. So the House decided to take it out of that section and with that funding and move it into G300 with ARPA funding. And this is on top of 5.5 million provided through CRF funds in the summer or fall of 2021.
Is this 12.8 million, was this unanticipated, like employee expenses, consultant expenses? What kind of increase did the 5.5 million represent over the base unemployment program expenses, and what does the $12.8 million? That's a big jump. What are the expenses we're talking about? Do we know?
We do have the list. It's a combination of ongoing personnel expenses, contractor costs, and it is an enormous, the 12 and the 5 together, the $18 million is a very large percentage of the total, extraordinarily large from what we budgeted, because we did not apparently, when we built the budget for 22 in DOL, we built it basically in a pre-pandemic baseline, thinking that we would come back down to it quicker than we have, apparently. So that's, unanticipated is a hard sort of word to use here. But it was something probably that should have been pressed on more when we built the budget last year to understand what the cost structure in DOL around these programs were. For
question.
Did they, sorry, Senator Brock, did you have a question?
I do have a question, if I may.
Yes, please.
Do any of these funds represent any system changes or any system work, or is that included elsewhere in what we've already passed regarding investments in a new and replacement IT system for DOL?
So I don't think they represent anything that is replacing the current system. They do represent funds to make the current system operate, the contractors that we need, but they are not funds for, you will see that in the IT section of the ARPA section, and you will see that in the governor's recommend, but these are current steady state operational funds. They're not replacement system related.
That's interesting, because
Yeah.
can you get us the percentage increase or the base funding? And did the department come in and ask?
I believe very early in the summer, they came into the finance and management, and I know that finance and management has done a great deal of back and forth of understanding exactly what their need is for this year, and we will get you the documents they've submitted to the committee.
Okay, because we were led to believe
Yeah.
that I don't know who covers these expenses, like during the pandemic. I'm sure there was a lot of federal help, but these are general fund dollars, and we were led to believe that unemployment was, I think in September, was down to 1,500 people in the state of Vermont in this fiscal year. So how it exploded in this fiscal year so much, and I mean, I don't know if they're just paying back debt that they
Yeah.
incurred from previous years? And is it steady state? Are they gonna, now that unemployment is down at low levels, are they gonna still need, $18 million more in staffing or consultants?
So we don't have to go into it here, but you don't see this stretched out into the governor's 23 budget. And so there is elements of sort of backlog of past bills embedded in here. And that is partly why the House decided to switch it from general fund, which the governor had, to ARPA funding,
Okay.
because it was in response to to the pandemic. I'm sorry. And I'm sorry, I have a physical
go.
therapy appointment and I have to leave the committee in a moment.
Okay,
so-
Thank you, Stephanie. We all have those problems. Okay, let's go on to the state colleges.
So the House is recommending a $7.3 million appropriation for the Vermont State Colleges, which is meant to go towards the critical occupation scholarships. And what they're doing here is they're funding it through the second year. So the governor's recommendation had been for 2.4 million or 2.35 million, which was just to cover the second semester of this year. And the reason that that he was recommending an adjustment was the initial allocation was oversubscribed. Just topping it up, bringing it through the end of the year, and the House is wanting to bring it forward to fund 2 more semesters beyond.
So seems to be a recurring theme here. Why would they put that extra $5 million in budget adjustment and not wait until the big bill?
It's too bad we lost Stephanie because I'm not sure I have that insight, but I can definitely look into it for you, and I can get you sort of the rationale behind that, if that's all right.
I mean, it's the same sort of question that we had on VHIP. And
Yeah.
why are they appropriating so much in budget adjustment? And they know that money is going to be used in the subsequent year. I think yesterday we were told on VHIP that they wanted to appropriate it now, even though they weren't going to spend it this year. They wanted to send a signal to the nonprofits that they don't have to lay off and hire. And it just seems a little, we're breaking from past tradition, and Stephanie mentioned that we are, but for these kinds of things, I'm not sure there's a really good reason. I mean, I guess I could see it in the Vermont State Colleges. I mean, if someone's coming in and they have a 2-year program and they say, well, you've only funded me for 1 year and I don't know what's going to happen my second year, I can't afford it. So maybe there is an important message to be sent here. But anyhow, that's my question. And if you could get back to us, that'd be great.
Sure. Yeah, I as you suspect also, it could be a very similar type answer, but I can check in on that. So are there any other questions before we move on? We have a continued slide on section G30 or G300 next.
No, good. Thank you.
So continuing in the same section and continuing also with the ARPA funding, there is a $1 million appropriation for up to 2 free classes in a calendar year at VUVM. This is for Vermont residents who are, seeking a transition to a new career or to enhance job skills. I believe the term for this is upskilling, but this is one of the workforce development programs that are being appropriated for here. In a similar type lens of worker development. Sorry, Senator Clarkson.
Yeah, I mean, I just have a question on this. I mean, we invested in the state colleges and CCV to do this work with our with COVID unemployed last year. It seems strange to switch institutions for something similar to what our objective was with CCV. I mean, we spent 1.3, I think, was it? Is somebody correct me if maybe it was 2.3. At the end of last year, people will remember that we provided anybody on unemployment the opportunity to get an upskilled class at CCV. I'm just puzzled by this, a new program with a different institution, sort of similar purpose. It strikes me as a challenge, and I'd love to sort of earmark this as a question.
Okay.
Now, I'm guessing that we're supporting and sustaining the CCV program as well. And there may be some students at UVM that fit into this criteria and want to encourage the students who are at UVM to also go in this
Well,
direction. So
this
I
is
don't know that it's,
pleasant.
I don't know that it's replacement of one versus another. It may be supplemental.
It may be, but I'd like to know more about it. And
Yep.
it's not for students at UVM, it's for Vermont residents. It's just for it's for anybody.
Oh, I see. I see. Okay. Yep.
So that's my concern is that
I hear you. Yeah. Are we doing it twice? Okay. Yep.
Yeah, I don't know if some of the reasoning behind that could tie back to how oversubscribed the program with the Vermont State Colleges was, and just providing more options. But we'll look into that for you.
yeah, that would be great because yeah, it was such a success that
Right.
I'd rather keep funding that than fund a whole new program elsewhere or do
Right.
both. But
Okay.
And sort of in the same lens of career development, there's a $500,000 appropriation for 3 public independent career technical education centers. And I know those centers are the Hanford Career Center, the Southwest Career Center, and the River Valley Technical Center. Those are what's in the bill. And so this appropriation is coming from ARPA to fund those programs.
like they were left out of being funded
Right.
through the normal channels and are in fairly strong need.
And there's a $6 million appropriation for retention payments for childcare, for the childcare workforce, which, as we've all seen, childcare has been a struggle for many working parents, especially during the pandemic. And this last piece here I have titled under other. It's tying together some funding that's coming from a couple of different sections, but to just put everything in one place, I've got it here. There's a $60 million healthcare and social service retention program, and that's that retention program is meant to allow employers to make retention payments to their employees, right? And it's giving them a flexibility in terms of how they want to award those payments, and also giving them some flexibility on how to best encourage their employees to stay with them beyond the duration of the program. And that is being made up of $26 million in ARPA funding, a $16 million appropriation from the Medicaid Global Commitment Fund, and then another $18 million in HCBS federal funding increases.
So, who does the money for the child care, who is it appropriated to?
It's my understanding that that is meant for daycare providers.
Right,
Right.
but what agency of state government
Right.
is getting the money?
That is a good question that I don't have in front of me right now.
Senator Sorokin,
Yes.
Ms. Graham Campbell from Joint Fiscal Office. It's appropriate to the Department for Children and Families to be granted to child
Thank
care
you.
workers.
And have they given any, when you say retention, I may have missed this. There's really no program parameters. It goes to DCF and then they decide how people apply for it. Does it go to the centers, or do individual daycare workers ask for a grant? Do we know anything more about how that, has it been done? Has this been done in the past? And if not, have they expressed how they're going to get the money out the door?
I don't know the answer to that question. I don't know if there's a sort of side bill, or there have been discussions within the appropriations committee to set up a new program. This appears to be sort of new additional funding, and the section of the bill essentially lays out that it's appropriating this 6 million, and the employers, will have the flexibility in determining how to best provide that financial assistance using this 6 million. So there may be a bill sort of floating out there in terms of the administration of this, but there's not a whole lot of detail within budget adjustment that lays out how this money is supposed to go to childcare workers. I mean, that's in contrast to this other line item that Pat is highlighting here, which is the healthcare social retention. That has some more parameters around it. That one is up to $3,000 per full-time equivalent. It's more specified. So we can get you more information on those retention payments for the child care, but in the bill itself and budget adjustment, there's not a whole lot around what the definition of this is or how it's going to be carried out.
And they're expecting, again, this is my perennial question here, this $6 million, as you understand it, to be expended in FY22?
I don't know. As you said, I think it would be challenging to get it out the door before the end of the fiscal year, but we'll have to double check on that issue.
Okay. I would say in 1 second, Senator Clarkson, just for the committee's purpose, Senator Clarkson and I met with the House counterparts, and I think we mentioned that they're going to be focusing on workforce capacity issues. And I saw their calendar for this week, and they're definitely doing it. They're having in a lot of different segments of the economy to talk about their workforce needs. So that division of work is working well. So we'll wait to see what they come up with. But, I just don't know. It's a question that I have again and again. It's a lot of money. And I'm just wondering if there should be at least, I would think, some base parameters, but maybe not.
Well, to build on that, Mr. Chair, I'd like to add, actually, as this comes to the Senate, I'd really like to check in with our House counterparts to find out what their letter looked like to the Appropriations Committee, because they actually may have parameters for this. Because it strikes me this needs parameters, and actually this needs to be out the door tomorrow. So, Graham, for me, budget adjustment is about spending as quickly as possible within the fiscal year, so that we know the need for this is immediate. We're in a crisis on childcare, and keeping workers is, we've just closed our infant section at our local daycare, which is just sending parents and the community into a tizzy. So this money is needed immediately. So I'd like us to find out more about this, and this needs parameters, and this needs urgency.
So let me just suggest this. I don't know who it'd be directed to, but probably someone in joint fiscal. I've seen some of the letters from the substantive committees to the House Appropriations Committee. I'm sure you can easily access those on the committee webpage, or ask the committee assistant of appropriations or the substantive committee. If you could just get those letters to Scott to distribute to us, so we can read more about what the substantive committees recommended to House Appropriation.
Thanks.
Yeah,
that would be great.
Yeah.
Could I just clarify that question? So you're looking specifically for the letters from the relevant to these.
right. It would basically be commerce in general.
Yeah.
There are 2 letters. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Are there any other questions on this? We have one more slide.
No, this is great.
So last piece here, it's a short slide. In the miscellaneous one-time appropriations, there's a $250,000 allocation to ACCD for the municipal planning grants.
Yeah, I would like to ask you about this. I've been involved with these in the past prior life. What this is above and beyond what does this go to municipalities or to the regional planning commissions? I guess it goes to I guess what I'm
Um,
asking, isn't there a proportion of the property transfer tax that gets divvied up and goes to, for municipal planning grants, or is this totally separate and apart? And what is their base funding every year for, or what is the base funding for municipal planning grants every year?
So I know the first part of the question I know it's, these are allocated for the commission to then dole out. But to your second question, I don't have an answer, or I don't know off the top of my head what the base is right now.
I mean, obviously, this is really helpful in terms of housing, and more money to these folks would be important, but I'm just trying to figure, this is not a new
No.
program. We fund municipal planning grants presently through ACCD. I don't know whether they're competitive or, you know, spread out regionally across the state. I'd like to know a little bit more about this in its entirety, where, how it came to pass, why it's needed this year, and, how much of an increase it is, and is this going to be continued in future in the governor's 23 budget? Are we raising the base for this?
Right. Good. They are competitive, I believe.
Okay.
Senator, if I could just provide a little bit more information in the FY22 big bill, the municipal and regional planning fund was appropriated about $3.7 million. So that may not be the entirety of the money that's flowing to municipal and that fund, but it's my understanding that this money is going to, as Pat said, to the regional planning commissions as well.
Okay. And I'm wondering if it has any interplay, I don't think it does, with the bylaw modernization grants
Right.
that have just been awarded. If you could just get us some more information on this, that would be helpful. Especially, I want to know whether this is one-time funding or is going to be ongoing into the base, because we're going to be dealing more with the bylaw modernization, and they're probably very distinct. The bylaw modernization is what it is. This is probably a lot of the core funding for some of the regional commissions.
Right.
So,
And if I may, Mr. Chair, the bylaw grants were made directly from the Department of Housing and Community Development, as opposed to these, which I think are, as Graham said, from the regional planning commissions. Is that right?
Yes, that's what Pat said. This money
Let me
goes
try
to the
that,
regional
Pat,
planning
right.
commissions. Yeah.
Pat, are you Pat or Patrick?
Whichever you prefer.
Oh, really? You don't?
I think I signed most of my emails Pat, so you can
Okay.
go with that.
Great.
Okay.
But
Thank
you won't offend me.
Oh, well, God forbid.
sounds good. Okay. So we've done housing. What about economic development? Are there more slides, or are we done with the
So
presentation?
that was all the slides. There aren't any adjustments made for any direct grants to businesses in either the governor's or the House's recommendations. So you saw previously there are some appropriations that are being recommended for that are mostly focused on workforce development and retention. But there weren't any adjustments that are being proposed for those direct grants to businesses.
So Pat, were you listening into a fair amount of the budget adjustment testimony in the House?
That was mostly Stephanie and Maria.
Okay, because we're going to be talking about, and we have started talking about, the economic recovery grants, making some adjustments potentially in budget adjustment, the remote worker, relocated worker program, making some adjustments. We've heard from the agency, I think we got a sort of a gray kind of message. I think they want to see some changes, but they didn't offer any immediate. And I know in the relocated worker program, they're pretty much out of money. So there's going to have to be a hiatus unless something's done quickly there.
Right. I'm sort of surprised we don't see a budget adjustment request here.
Right.
So it's,
Especially on the bylaw modernization, no, excuse me, I'm slipping back, especially on the gap recovery grants, because they were appropriated something like 20 million or 30 million, I think, and they only spent 3. So unless they're just wanting to carry that over indefinitely, I think that was, Graham, was that ARPA funds? Their gap bridge money? Do either of you guys know?
Unfortunately, we do not. I guess
Yeah.
I'll sort of apologize in advance on behalf of during fiscal. This is kind of like a team effort between, like,
Yeah,
Pat and I working on the revenue stuff, and then there's also the
Yeah,
appropriations.
I understand, but the question we have to answer there is, I mean, if we were just to leave this with no statement or changes, I don't think they could spend the ARPA money through by 2020, the end of 2024, at the rate they're going. So there should have been some adjustment for this year, certainly, but they didn't propose any. Do you know whether there's any proposal in the FY23 budget for economic recovery? Because the governor held back, or we held back, another 20 or 25 million. Is he suggesting adding to an undersubscribed, a woefully undersubscribed program? And what is he doing with that other 25 million in FY23?
My preliminary read of the budget book did not see anything like that, but I hesitate to give the committee a full answer.
Yeah, and the governor's proposal last year held back a lot of money for future years in ARPA. This program and the capital investment program held back money, but that doesn't, and he had a roadmap that he was going to spend that extra money in the out years, like with the transition, with the capital investment program. I think he had it like $10 million each year or something like that. But that was not enacted into any law. So maybe he's moving some of those monies around in FY23, and we'll have to figure that out. But that's not as urgent, obviously, as budget adjustment. Okay, that's been very helpful. I really appreciate you guys coming in. Are there any other questions for joint fiscal? We have about 8 minutes before we go to break. Thank you, Pat. Thank you, Graham. Senator Clarkson, you have a question?
yeah, no, it's just puzzling to me what's missing here, and what's missing. The administration has identified these as, I think that the 27 million that hasn't been spent, I'm guessing that assumption is that they will spend it once we iron out the criteria and improve access for those sectors in need, the sectors we've identified that are still in need. What's really puzzling to me, given the highlight of the new worker and relocated and remote worker program, is that not here in budget adjustment, because to me, that's a big piece of what we need to be looking at, the criteria and more money. So I would love to explore that and see if that, I'm sure it wasn't in the House's letter as a recommend, but I would love us to explore that in budget adjustment.
Okay, well, the timing of Senator Ballant is exquisite, because she may have to carry that kind of message to appropriations. There are some things where we really do need to be heard in appropriations here.
Yeah.
And we need to ask some more questions of the administration. And one of the keys I think we need to understand, especially going forward into 23, is the governor suggesting that we fix the gap funding, or does he want to divert the money to other programs that have perhaps are undersubscribed versus,
Right.
that are oversubscribed versus this program, which is undersubscribed. Does he want to fix this program and spend all this money as he had planned last year, or has he found other places where he wants to go? So we will be talking about that for sure.
Yes, and I think some of the things that we've had in emails from the administration yesterday, we'll have a robust conversation, but my guess is that they're on the 27 million that we will be ironing out and getting that money out the door to as soon as we can fix the criteria. Same with the new worker, but the money is missing here, and I think the money needs to be asked for. We have lots of work to do with BAA, clearly.
And we're going to have the Department of Labor in at 11 o'clock, so we could drill a little deeper on their ongoing massive increase in expenses in a year where unemployment has dropped precipitously, and whether that's base funding or not. It's a curious factor,
Right.
Okay, so let's take a break now, and we'll come back and we'll be talking about S210. I hope, Senator Brock mentioned he sent me an email. I haven't read it yet, but I will. I hope we can get to a vote today. It's not critical that we do, but we have an hour. I sent you just a preview because we have a couple of minutes. I said I would send you a memo if I had an amendment further, but I didn't get to speak to David until 8 this morning. So he's drafting something. It's very simple, and we will talk about that. And we'll also hear what Senator Brock has in mind. Becca, I will send you Senator Brock's. Is that okay if I share with the committee, Senator Brock? I haven't read